We are live and happy holidays. And tonight's going to be a really fun episode. I'm really happy to be doing a live one again. It's been a bit because people's schedules are so nutty. But tonight I have my friend Jeremy Arnold, who I have been trying to get to do an episode for a while. So this is a long time coming.
It is a long time coming. I'm happy to be here, finally.
Thank you. And you braved the craziness of my move. So thank you for wading through a sea of boxes through Chateau Bible to get here.
You're very welcome.
And Jeremy is a writer for Turner Classic Movies, and he is a film historian and author, and he's got a new book all about Christmas movies, and it's right here. So we're going to talk about his book, and we're going to talk about his other writing, and we're going to talk about Bing Crosby Christmas movies, our favorite Christmas movies, ones we recommend for different people with different styles that they like of film. So we're going to have a fun episode, and we are going to decorate Bing Crosby's sugar cookie recipe, which I have already made. So welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us.
Yes, I came largely for the cookies.
Yes, yes, you did. Well,
no, it's always fun to talk movies with you.
Thank you. You too. Well, I want to talk about the genesis of the recipe, by the way. I kind of waded through a lot of options for recipes, but there is a book by Frank DeCaro, who I randomly met at a party last year, which is crazy, but he's so nice, called The Dead Celebrity Cookbook Presents Christmas in Tinseltown. And they had a recipe for Bing Crosby's sugar cookies. And I thought, well, that's kind of a perfect tie-in to your book, because Bing made two very beloved Christmas movies, and of course, Sings White Christmas.
In both of them, yes.
Yeah, so that seemed like the right thing to do for this particular episode. So since this is like a multi-step process, I'm going to kind of talk about what I did before Jeremy got here, and then we'll decorate cookies and eat them while we talk about the book. So what I did here, I used 1 1/4 cups of sugar, 2 eggs, 2/3 cup of vegetable shortening. I used Crisco, 3 cups of flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1.5 teaspoons of salt, 1 tablespoon of orange juice. I don't like store-bought orange juice, kind of a snob about this. I juice myself in my juicer over there. And then a grated rind of 1 orange. And when I did this, I kind of thought, I've not seen a sugar cookie recipe that uses the juice of an orange and the rind of an orange. But I have to admit, I ate some of the dough. It actually tastes really good. So I'm liking it, and I hope you will too. So then I put the dough in the refrigerator, and then I rolled it out with the rolling pin. I couldn't find all of my cookie cutters, but I could find stars, snowflakes, and circles. So that's what we went with. So yeah, I baked them for about 13 minutes at 350, and this is now what they look like. So we are going to decorate them, and we're going to talk all about Christmas movies.
Yes, and who doesn't like talking about Christmas movies? I feel even people who aren't, cineasts who live and breathe film their whole lives, people love Christmas movies, and they love debating them and talking about them and sharing them and exposing people to ones they don't know already. It's really become a ritual of the season as much as Christmas cookies themselves.
Great. Well, let's do this though. I always like to kind of start with, how did you fall in love with the movies? Because we all kind of have our origin stories of what was the movie that made you go, wow, this is amazing. I want to spend my life with this. What set that in motion?
I would have to say it goes back to my dad.
Okay.
My dad was born in the mid-30s and grew up in Brooklyn, and he loved going to the movies as he was growing up. And his favorite movies were really Warner Brothers films of the 1940s, and those are the movies of his childhood. And so he introduced them to me at a very young age. And I don't know how old I was, 6, 7, 8, 9. I was starting to be exposed to Humphrey Bogart and James Cagney and Barbara Stanwyck. And
that's raising a child right.
Yeah, thank you. And so I just fell in love with movies from that era, starting that way. But I also started to notice that the movies that were really interesting and were really good, they had names in the credits that kept coming up. Maybe Alfred Hitchcock or Fritz Lang or Vincent Minnelli, or any number of others. And I started to sort of figure out how directors' styles, inform movies that way. And then later, years later, I went to college at Wesleyan University, which has a film department that was founded by Janine Basinger, one of the great film scholars.
One of my heroes.
And a close friend of mine for 35 years. She taught me most of what I know about movies.
Wow.
And she's so inspiring when she teaches. You know, she's so full of knowledge and insight, but she also just loves the movie. She never lost the emotional connection to these movies that she grew up with in the 40s and 50s. And so, yeah, after years of all kinds of jobs in the film industry, I sort of settled in on freelance writing, and now I've done a few books.
Excellent, excellent. All right, so let's get started decorating the Christmas cookies, and let's see if we've got any comments rolling in yet. Sometimes it's weird. Sometimes the comments won't come up on my phone for a little bit, but okay, they're coming up now. So, shoot.
Are these also decorated? They're just different colors?
They're different colors.
Okay.
I've got red, yellow, green, blue. I've got, this is more like a glittery gel. I've got rainbow sprinkles, red sugar, green sugar. Yeah, trying to get a variety of stuff. So, okay, so when the holidays come around, a lot of us are with our families, me included, and not everybody in our families is a cinephile. In my case, I usually have to beg and plead and cajole my family into seeing something. But then afterward, they're like, oh, that was so much fun. We enjoyed it. So, and I have a dilemma maybe you can help me with. Okay, the historic Lucas Theater in Savannah, Georgia, where my family is at, they're showing 2 nights in a row of Christmas movies. The first night is National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. The second night is It's a Wonderful Life. And my mom said, pick one. And I'm like, oh, so I'm trying to agonize over what do I drag my family to and why. So help me here. What do you think?
Well, I mean, my first reaction is, of course, It's Wonderful Life. It's the ultimate Christmas movie. I think it's a better movie than Christmas Vacation, which is fun, but not everyone's cup of tea.
My dad doesn't like it, I can tell you that.
Yeah, there's some people just don't dig that kind of humor, and that's fine. However, I still think it's pretty funny because it is so relatable in terms of the sort of tropes of the season, you know, from picking out a tree, decorating it, cooking turkey, having a crazy cousin Eddie.
Cousin Eddie. We all have a cousin Eddie.
We all have a version of that. So there's that. But so I would say if they've never seen It's a Wonderful Life, take them to that. And
okay.
If they haven't seen Christmas Vacation, then take them to that. And if they've seen both, then I don't know, flip a coin or just do it.
Yes, I will probably wind up taking them to It's a Wonderful Life. So when you were writing this book, I'm sure there were certain titles that were like, obviously I have to include, like say Meet Me in St. Louis or, you know, certain titles. But I noticed you picked some stuff that was also a little more off the beaten path, and I love that. So tell me kind of about your selection process, like what movies you decided, okay, this has to be included, and what movie did you kind of, is there anything that you fought to have in the book that you're like, no guys, we have to do this. This is going to be, you know, a good one.
Well, okay, of course, I did the original edition of this book 5 years ago, and this is an expanded version, which is it's the same book plus a lot of added new material. So there are 5 new films added in terms of getting their own full chapters or entries, but there are also dozens of others that I incorporated in new special chapters and essays that run throughout the book. There's one about film noir and Christmas. There's one about classic Christmas cartoons. There are explorations of the different versions of A Christmas Carol and Three Godfathers and Little Women. And there's an epilogue covering the last 20 years of Christmas movies. So in those essays or chapters, I was able to write about many, many other Christmas movies, not to the same word length as the full chapters, but some of them get a pretty significant write-up. And it was a good way of just working in a lot of extra movies without making the book 500 pages and weigh even more than it does now, which is kind of heavy.
Well, like as a film noir aficionado, which you and I both love the film noir genre. So tell us about, like, if someone is not a traditional Christmas movie person where the bells are ringing and everybody's happy and things are great, what is the perfect noir Christmas movie?
Well, there's only, even though Christmas pops up in a lot of noirs, there's only one movie that I personally consider to be both a genuine film noir and a genuine Christmas movie, and that's Blast of Silence, which is not as well known as other noirs. It was made in 1961, sort of at the very end of the noir period, and it was made by independent first-time filmmakers on a super low budget all over New York City. But it has a really strong black and white noir look, and it is one of the bleakest and most fatalistic and cynical movies that you will ever see.
I need to see this now.
And the reason it's a Christmas movie is because it's about a killer who goes to New York to carry out a hit on the day after Christmas.
As one does.
As one does. And so it's about the days leading up to that. And on the soundtrack, there is a voiceover narration read in the second person by Lionel Stander, with great dialogue that was written by Waldo Salt.
Oh, yeah.
Who was uncredited because he was blacklisted, as was Lionel Stander. And it's full of dialogue like, you hate Christmas. Christmas gives you the creeps. Christmas is for suckers. And it sort of runs with this idea that Christmas is an insufferable, saccharine time, and it's all a bunch of hogwash. The movie takes that and uses it to build the character of this assassin and to make the audience experience the movie through the prism of Christmas time. So it's constantly forcing us to look at it through that lens.
Wow.
And
I'll be darned.
so I would say seek that out. There's another film that I love talking about, which is Cover Up, which is a 1949. It's sort of a romantic comic mystery, which sort of skirts the edges of film noir. It wants to be a noir, but it's also a Christmas movie with a very light romantic story and a nice family in a small town. And the movie is sort of like a push and pull between the noir mystery element, where Dennis O'Keefe is trying to find a killer that no one really wants to talk to him about it. So that mixed with him and Barbara Britton forming this romance. And you have these beautiful, light, jaunty, Christmassy scenes, and then suddenly you have some dark, noir, mysterious scene. And it just back and forth. It's really interesting. I don't think that in the end it is a noir, though. The thing is, Christmas movies and film noir, they were diametrically opposed.
Oh, yeah, which is why I love the concept.
Noir is about pulling characters down into a world of fatalism and a sinister undercurrents of society.
Oh, yeah.
And Christmas movies is about lifting characters up and letting them transform to their better natures.
Yeah.
Like Scrooge. And so the concerns of one are just the opposite of the concerns of the other. And that's why they just don't mix, other than Christmas often pops up in noirs as irony, tonal counterpoint, to sort of say, isn't it ironic that all this murder and mayhem is happening at Christmas time, which should be a joyful time.
I don't know if you could totally consider it a noir. I don't think it knows totally what it wants to be. But Lady on a Train with Deanna Durbin, that movie is all over the place, but I enjoy it.
I love Lady on a Train. In fact, I just saw it the other night at the New Beverly in a beautiful 35mm print. Oh my God, it was great.
So bummed I wasn't there for that. That sounds great.
And yeah, this is an interesting movie. It's like a hybrid of noir and comedy and musical.
Right.
It stops for a few songs. And
love to have been in on the production meetings for Lady on a Train, because they had to have been all over the place with that one.
I know, I kind of feel like they're like, let's put Deanna in a mystery comedy, but it's Deanna Durbin, so we have to throw in a few songs. And it's Christmas, so
that into
right, when the other night, when she started singing Silent Night, the audience started laughing, and it's because it was so incongruous. It was like, out of nowhere, the movie stops for her to sing Silent Night in the most glamorous Hollywood close-up you'll ever see.
Oh, yeah.
And it just sort of stuck out like a sore thumb, but I think people were laughing at it with delight. So, yes, I love Lady on a Train.
Oh, I do too. So, okay, so we've talked about some noirish Christmas movies. What are some of the most laugh out loud funny Christmas movies to you?
Christmas in Connecticut.
I love that one. Love that one. We paid tribute to that on Hollywood Kitchen with Burbis Stanwyck.
The Man Who Came to Dinner.
Oh, that's a great one.
Verbal zinger every 10 seconds. What else? I would say, we talked about National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. I mean, that is pretty funny. The Muppet Christmas Carol.
Oh, anything with the Muppets.
I love The Muppet
anything.
Christmas Carol. You know, it is one of the most faithful adaptations of the story of any movie version.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of remarkable. I mean, you would not think that. Michael Caine said that when he took the role, he decided he'd play it like he was doing it with the Royal Shakespeare Company, and he would just ignore the fact that there were puppets all around him.
It's probably the right way,
That
sure.
contrast is just comic gold. He's such a good Scrooge. I wish he had played it in a more traditional adaptation as well. But yeah,
Oh,
he's
yeah.
way up there.
Definitely. And what is the most like? Is there a Christmas movie that gets you very emotional or makes you want to cry? Like I would say
Yes.
for me, Remember the Night. I love that movie. I watch it every Christmas. And it's so touching to me because that movie has a tenderness that I don't think you see that quality in films today. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think Mitchell Leisen is underrated.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
vastly.
I just came here from a screening of Remember the Night a few hours ago.
That's right.
The Old Town Musical.
Uh-huh.
I introduced the film. It was a full house. The vast majority of the people there had never seen the movie before.
Wow.
And so I had the pleasure of watching it again on the big screen with a mostly a first-time audience, and it just made it all the better. I think it is the most emotional Christmas movie. It's actually my favorite Christmas movie. I think It's a Wonderful Life is, you know, I call it the ultimate Christmas movie because it taps into the entire emotional spectrum of emotions that we associate with Christmas, from the highs to the lows, you know, the joy to the loneliness. All of those things are very common experiences. And I mean, there's a film that goes from the low point is this character, George Bailey, trying to commit suicide. And then, of course, the high point is the end where he has renewed his will to live and be with his family and all that. And all his friends come to rescue him, to help him. Remember the Night is just such a poignant, romantic story. It mixes in a lot of comedy though, and it has some real not really, well, I guess sort of darkness in its own way. And it takes it treats the idea that Barbara Stanwyck will have to go to prison to pay for having been a thief. It treats that very seriously. Like it's a really big deal. It's a very moralistic film.
Yeah.
And it ties it to their romance really well. Preston Sturges wrote it. He was unhappy with the way Mitchell Leisen, altered the script.
Billy Wilder didn't like Mitchell Leisen either. And I'm like, you guys, he was so much better than you think he was.
Haven't you guys seen Remember the Night? It's really like a perfect movie. It's a great script. And
I agree.
I think that what I read was that Mitchell Leisen took the original screenplay, which had favored the Fred McMurray character a lot more. It made him very dominant and more heroic. And Leisen decided to give more time to the Barbara Stanwyck character and to give them really equal prominence in the story, which I think was the right choice. Yeah.
Tiny bit off the subject, but another Mitchell Leisen movie that I personally love very much is Hold Back the Dawn.
Oh yeah.
My gosh, that's so good too. So yeah, Mitchell Leisen, criminally underrated filmmaker.
Oh, and he also did another Preston Sturges script with Easy Living.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, he does not get enough love. Not at all.
No. And of course he did Midnight, which is one of the all-time best.
I love that. I love that one too. Love that one too. So, okay. So TCM, of course, which we love, does a ton of Christmas movies throughout the year. Is there a Christmas movie that you cover in your book that is a little more off the beaten path? I'm thinking maybe Holly and the Ivy, something that's maybe not a traditionally thought of movie when you think of Christmas movies, but something that's really good and worth seeing.
Well, I would say the Holly and the Ivy for sure, because it's just not that well known.
It's not. Yeah, I agree.
And this is a British film made in 1950. And it's about a family in a small town in England. It's really the most common type of Christmas story, which is a family coming together for the holidays, some kind of dysfunctional family who have to work out their dysfunction and their problems and their conflicts over Christmas. And the fact that it's during the holiday, the season is sort of a catalyst for them to work things out. That is the most common Christmas movie. This one just happens to be set in at the time, modern present day slice of life, British countryside. And Ralph Richardson plays a town vicar who has sort of become disconnected from his family, and who everyone's keeping secrets from each other. And there are all sorts of family problems that get worked out. beautifully acted. It's based on a play. It's a little bit theatrical, but I don't think it's so stagey that it makes it a boring watch. I think it actually is cinematic enough to work, and it's fluid, and the performances are wonderful, and it's just different.
Okay.
But another movie that I think is the most surprising Christmas movie that I've seen, although Blast of Silence was one too, but the one that really knocked my socks off was The Curse of the Cat People, the great Val Lewton
Yes,
movie
Val Lewton.
from
All about
1944.
Val Lewton around here. So yes, tell us about that and tell us why it would be thought of as a Christmas movie.
Well, you know what? First, let me just say what I think a Christmas movie is.
Yes.
Maybe we should do that first.
I did a blue cookie, like Elvis, Blue Christmas. I kind of like untraditional
I like it.
things, I guess.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Yours are better than mine.
I'm just having fun, just kind of making a mess here. But
So my take is this. People every year love to argue over whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie, whether other movies are Christmas movies, and people dig in. They get really obsessed with their point of view on this, and they can't believe that the other person could see it differently. How could you think Die Hard is a Christmas movie? It's too violent. There's all this shooting. That's not Christmassy. And other people might say, how could you think it's not a Christmas movie? It's actually a joyful, cheerful action movie about a family, a husband and wife trying to reconnect, and it's full of Christmas references and tropes.
and he goes home.
And he
Yes.
goes home. So I think when people are arguing these things, they're really arguing definition, competing definitions.
Okay.
And that is
Fair.
fine. Everyone can have their own definition of Christmas movie because Christmas movies, historically, were never a genre. Frank Capra never said the words, I'm shooting a Christmas movie.
Yeah, I'm sure they didn't have marketing meetings at Columbia over at
Yeah.
It's a Wonderful Life. I doubt that existed like that.
Yes. So we have retroactively labeled these past classics Christmas movies because we have discovered them, and we have formed a love of watching movies at Christmas time that have Christmas in them. I think thanks to It's a Wonderful Life playing ad nauseum on television in the 70s and 80s when it was in the public domain.
Yeah.
It played every December, all day, every day on whatever local station you had. And it got people used to the idea of Christmas on screen at Christmas time. Same thing happened with Miracle on 34th Street. Same thing happened with the 1951 A Christmas Carol, which did not do well when it first opened. And the same thing happened with A Christmas Story, which played on TBS and TNT. It still does every year.
Yeah.
24-hour blocks. So, okay. So all of this is a preface to say what my definition of a Christmas movie is. I didn't think it was very helpful for this book to think it was just any movie that had a Christmas tree in it or something like that. But I found that the Christmas movies that really resonate and really endure are the ones in which the season is actually playing a meaningful role in the storytelling. So is the season really driving the characters and their connections and conflicts and growth? And is it inspiring characters to transform, like Ebenezer Scrooge? You get the sense in a lot of these movies that the season is an active force that's nudging action.
It's like a character.
It's like a character. And I think that is the kind of magic of the season that we all like to happen every year, to find that we all think should and could happen. And I don't know if it happens that often in real life. I'm sure it does, but it happens in the movies, and we can all experience it that way.
This is true. This is true. Do you guys have any, in your family, do you have any Christmas traditions in your family that you enjoy watching together as a family?
Not really. I'm Jewish, and we always celebrated Christmas and Hanukkah both every year. And so Christmas to me has always been a totally secular, just a fun celebration, family getting together, good food, cookies, presents, things like that. And I don't know. I mean, I think we all like watching movies, but there's not one movie we all sit down and watch every year.
Okay.
So, and I never actually answered your previous question about an off the beaten track Christmas movie.
Yeah.
So with my definition, I found that The Curse of the Cat People is a Christmas movie. So this is a Val Lewton B movie made at RKO in 1944. It's like 70 minutes long. And it was made as a sequel to Cat People, which is a great classic horror movie that came out of nowhere and became one of the biggest hits of the year in 1942.
Love that movie.
So the RKO bosses, they said, Val, we want you to do a sequel, and it has to be called The Curse of the Cat People. They gave him the title. He hated the title. He resented the title. He thought it was lurid and stupid. And he decided, you know what? I'm not going to give them another horror movie. I'm going to give them something else. And what he made was this poignant little drama about a lonely little girl who forms an imaginary friend, a mother figure, who comes back in the shape of Simone Simon, the cat person who died in the first movie. Now, maybe she's the ghost of Irena, maybe she's just a conjuring in the girl's imagination because she found a picture of her. It's left ambiguous. But the point is that it becomes this like exploration of childhood trauma and parent-child dynamics. And about halfway through the movie, it gets to be Christmas time in the story. And on Christmas Eve, that's where the denouement of the film happens. And it just builds to a climactic scene late at night on Christmas Eve where all these different character conflicts and parent-child dynamics are resolved in these fascinating layers. I don't really know how else to describe it without giving too much away, but it's, I would say people should really take a look at The Curse of the Cat People. You'll be really surprised.
You know, another movie that I don't know how, I mean, it could qualify as a Christmas movie, but it could qualify as a lot of other things, is the two Judy Garland films, and In the Good Old Summertime and Meet Me in St. Louis, because both of them have Christmas in them. I don't know that I would call them fully centered around Christmas per se, but when Judy sings Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas to Margaret O'Brien, how can you not think of that?
You know, that song is so indelible. I feel like even if that was the only connection that the movie had to Christmas, it would be enough to make it a Christmas movie, because that is, you know, it's like the song White Christmas. It's just indelible. Everyone knows it. Everyone still hears it every year.
Yeah.
But I think it's a Christmas movie, Meet Me in St. Louis, in addition to just having the song. And that is because, you know, every chapter of the movie is set at a different season. The final, well, then there is an epilogue that's in the spring, but the final main sequence is Christmas time. And that is where the family finally resolves their central problem. You know, will they move from St. Louis to New York? And this has been the central conflict for most of the film. And so it's about a family trying to work things out, and Christmas helps them do it. Christmas nudges them to do it. And Leon Ames says, I've decided we'll stay in St. Louis until we rot. My favorite line in the picture. He's great in this. Yeah, so wonderful film.
Love that movie so much. I get so emotional every time I see it. And the family in it, you kind of want to be in that family. You're like, God, I want to move into that house. I want a room in that house with all of them. Like,
yeah, and you want to sing through your entire day. Just walking up and down the stairs, going to the bathroom, you're singing a song.
I mean, there's something about that movie. You never want that movie to end. Like every time it ends, I'm like, no, play it again. I don't want that movie to be over.
Well, and it's also so innovative as a musical. I mean, this is one of the most, I mean, this was one of the first musicals that really integrated the songs into the story, as opposed to the movie sort of stopping for the songs. I'm sure there are other examples of numbers and films before this that do it, but this one really went deep into that mode. And you know, my friend Patricia Kelly has told me that Gene Kelly thought it was maybe the best musical ever made. He just adored it. It was really influential to him.
That was I love that movie so very much. Oh my God. Okay, so I'm going to take a bite of a sugar cookie, by the way. So should we toast to Bing Crosby and eat some sugar cookies?
Yes, let's.
All right, to Christmas movies.
To Christmas movies.
All right.
Cheers.
See how these turned out. Good.
Yeah, pretty good.
I like the orange in this. You can taste it.
Yeah, really good. Well done, Carrie.
Yeah, thank you.
And look how colorful this tray of cookies is.
Now, let me ask you this, because in your book, you write essays, you research into these movies. What did you learn in doing this that maybe surprised you? Maybe it was like, wow, I had no idea about that story or that issue that came up.
Well, one thing was I hadn't realized, excuse me, how innovative the
water?
Yes, I do. How innovative the snow making in. Hang on. Excuse me, everybody. For for It's a Wonderful Life, I need more water. Sorry.
It's kind of dusty around here due to all the moving. I'm so sorry about that one.
You're very kind, but it was me having trouble eating a cookie. Okay, I think I'm better now. So for It's a Wonderful Life, they invented a new way of making snow to fall on movie sets. Before that time, it was almost always bleached cornflakes. And the problem with bleached cornflakes was that you couldn't really aim them. They were always really big. And the main problem was they were loud. When they were on the ground, they crunched if you walked on them or drove on them. So Frank Capra knew that he would have all these important dialogue scenes in the snow, and he didn't want to have to overdub all the scenes later on the sound stage, in the recording studio, which was the norm. So he instructed the RKO effects department to come up with something new. And they did. They came up with a solution that mixed foamite, which is the stuff in fire extinguishers, with water, sugar, and one other ingredient, salt maybe. I can't recall, but foamite is the main one. And they devised this system, which I have a photo of in the book, where this solution would be shot out of canisters high in the air, and there were these giant fans above the set with crew members who could tilt them and aim them. And these fans would push the snow, which formed from the solution being pushed up, onto the set with whatever intensity was desired for the scene. And it was silent, and it looked realistic. And it was so innovative that it won an Academy Technical Award 2 years later, and it became the standard snowmaking system for movies for decades. And it's still used today, among other techniques.
That is really interesting. Oh my gosh, I did not know that. That is so interesting.
And something else I discovered was there are 3 movies that were very successful, popular Christmas movies, which started as much darker screenplays. They were conceived in a much darker, serious way. And they were all softened by their directors during the pre-production process. And those movies were Gremlins, which was, as a script, it was just a nasty horror movie, pretty brutal. Die Hard, which was very violent, and the final movie you could say is violent, but as I say, it's also joyful. That was not in there at first. John McTiernan had that layered in. And the third one was Elf. Elf had been floating around Hollywood for like a decade before Jon Favreau made it. It was originally going to star Jim Carrey. That fell apart. And it was just a much harder edge. It wasn't a light fantasy like the final film we all know. And Jon Favreau, he read the script and said, I want to do this if I can make it a PG movie and not a PG-13 or R. I want to reclaim New York after 9/11 and have New York not known just for 9/11, but in the magical way that New Yorkers love New York. So that was his aim, and he succeeded.
Wow, that's great. I love hearing that. And the Home Alone movies are also fun Christmas movies as well. And even though, they kind of have a lot of other stuff going on in them.
Yes, and here's something to chew on. Home Alone and Die Hard are basically the same story.
They're battling a villain, trying to get back to their family. It's just Macaulay Culkin and Bruce Willis.
It's like, Home Alone is like Die Hard in a house with a little kid. So, he has to come up with ingenious ways to booby trap the building that he's in and get the villains, and people in Die Hard, they die in horrible ways, and in Home Alone they get they get pummeled like they're cartoon villains. In fact, Home Alone actually might be more violent than Die Hard if you really think about it.
Quite possibly, yes, that does make sense.
That team of stuntmen really went through the ringer.
They earned those paychecks. Let me see if my hands are encrusted in frosting. Let me see if anyone's asking us questions here online. Also, Miracle on 34th Street makes me tear up, says my friend Susie Schwab. That is true. We just got Edmund Gwenn at Hollywood Forever recently.
I was there
You
for
were
the
there.
inurnment.
I was in San Francisco that day seeing silent films, but I'm glad you were there. And I'm sure that was really special getting to honor him.
It really was. I mean, it was a little bizarre because no one there ever met him or knew him, although they did read a message from his surviving relatives, I think some great nieces or something in England. And that was very sweet. But otherwise, it was just people who love mainly Miracle on 34th Street. And the place was packed.
That's great.
And there were a lot of people dressed in Santa suits. And, that's a little much for me, but that's fine.
Hey.
It added to the flavor.
We have also at Hollywood Forever, of course, we have Judy Garland, who sang, of course, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas.
Mhm.
And we have Darren McGavin, who played Ralphie's dad in A Christmas Story. So we definitely have a lot of connections there at Hollywood Forever. Let's see. Cary Grant is the perfect Christmas angel, says Benjamin.
Oh, I was going to say Ruth Munsack.
Right? I thought well, Ruth is probably thinking it. I don't know if she's watching right now, but I'm sure she's thinking it. Yeah, I love the story about how when they were making Meet Me in St. Louis, Judy Garland was asked to sing the lyrics, "Have yourself a merry little Christmas. It may be your last. Next sure we will all be living in the past." I don't blame Judy for saying, I am not singing those words to Margaret O'Brien.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I had heard that story before researching the book, but I never read all the lyrics to the original. And I was so taken aback at how dark they were that I was able to get the original lyrics and the actual lyrics published on a page in the book so people could compare, because I thought it was so interesting. But yeah, and of course, the great irony is that even the version that she does sing is still pretty melancholy. It's pretty sad. It's also beautiful, but it really captures that dynamic of Christmas, of the season, which is beautiful and sad. I mean, it always is a mixture of those things.
Yeah, I've started doing this thing where every time there's a big holiday on social media, I post a picture of Dark Victory, because I love that movie. And I put, please be kind to other people, because the holidays are not fun and games for all of us. And a lot of people are dealing with economic hardships, with devastating and catastrophic personal loss, with grief, with broken relationships, with struggles. And I think sometimes it's easy to lose sight of that and get caught up in certain things. And I always try to just remind not only other people, but myself, pick up that phone and call a friend that you know maybe having a tough day or something. Because I think sometimes if you're going through a tough time and then the holidays come around, it kind of compounds the tough time. Because I think we've all had a few Christmases or holidays in our lives that went off the rails or for whatever the reason. And it's almost like Christmas makes it even more intense, that suffering, that pain, that loss.
Yes, it intensifies the highs and lows.
Yeah, and it's emotional as all get out, and it's a lot.
How's this for an illustration of the existence of lows of the Christmas season? 4 movies in this book have suicide, either attempted or contemplated. And that's kind of a lot of movies. But it kind of makes sense because, if you're a dramatist and you're dealing with a character who is going through levels of despair, joy, that's the spectrum you're working on. Well, the ultimate low of that is, I would say, suicide. And so it's like a perfect dramatic device for a screenwriter to, for example, It's a Wonderful Life. George Bailey tries to commit suicide, but at the end, he's at the total other end of that spectrum, embracing life, wanting to live, a new will to live, and appreciating his family and his friends. So yeah, I think what you say is so true. And, another thing about calling a friend who is going through a hard time, this is something I love about Remember the Night so much, and that is the kindness that characters show others. When Beulah Bondi welcomes Barbara Stanwyck into the house for Christmas, it is, oh my God, I tear up just thinking about it. And I just saw it 2 hours ago. It is so lovely because we know what this means to Barbara Stanwyck. She's having such a hard time, her character is in that film. And it's very touching to see people being kind in that way to a stranger, really.
I posted about this the other day on Facebook. There's a little coffee shop in my neighborhood that I go to almost every day for my latte. And the other day in my barista, I kind of said something like, "Oh, how you doing?" And she's like, "Oh, customers have been so awful today. They treat me like a punching bag. Those are her words. And it kind of broke my heart. I was like, oh my God, like you're getting me coffee. Like this is a great thing. But so now every time I go in there, I smile at her. I ask how she's doing. I'm going to go out and get her something for Christmas because I just feel like sometimes a word of kindness, a little, how are you doing? Or, hey, I got you a little, it just mean the world to someone who's hurting,
It's really true.
you know? And also, It's a Wonderful Life is emotional for me as well, because when you think about it, and I'm sure you know this, how this was the first movie Jimmy Stewart and Frank Capra made after World War II.
Right.
And you don't, I've always been told, because there's a lot of military in my family, when you've served in a war, you don't come back the same human being you were when you left. Like there is emotional fallout, there is trauma, there is a lot of baggage, there is an adjustment back to civilian life. And that's got to be really intense. So all of a sudden these guys are fighting for their lives over in Europe, and now they're back in Hollywood making a movie again. So for both of those men, that movie in particular had to have been a real adjustment, just getting back to their normal, whatever normal looks like, day-to-day lives, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think Capra was really changed by the war. And there have been books written about this. I Came Back is great, but there's there was a new sensitivity to maybe feeling that just pure comedies were kind of frivolous. They just were not interesting anymore. They weren't substantive enough. And I think one of the things that really attracted him to the It's a Wonderful Life story was the darkness that was in there. I mean, here's a movie, it's got incredible romance and comedy, and from slapstick to sophisticated comedy. It has wonderful, joyous family scenes, and it has real dark scenes where you go deep inside George Bailey. And I think Capra was really interested in going there because of the war experience. But even more so, I think Jimmy Stewart, he is so intense as George Bailey, and when he gets angry and yells at his family near the end, boy, that is shocking. When he yells at Uncle Billy and makes Thomas Mitchell start sobbing on the desk, that to me is maybe the most heartrending moment in the whole film. And Stewart is just vicious to him. And this is something that Stewart would start to explore more as the years went on for Alfred Hitchcock and Anthony Mann, those great Westerns. So this is sort of the beginning of that.
Definitely. But I always think it's so interesting when you know the context of kind of when and how and what point people were at when they made a film like that.
And, I say in the book too, World War II had a profound effect on the development of Christmas movies. The 1940s, I think, are the richest decade for Christmas movies. There's so many of them. And Christmas is being used throughout the 40s as a way of representing family, the family unit. And when you think about it, family was certainly top of mind across American society, because the first half of the decade was a trauma of families being broken apart as the war started and the war effort continued. And then the second half of the decade was about families trying to rebuild themselves. And sometimes their loved ones hadn't come back. And so rebuilding was going to be really painful and different. Yeah. And families were changing and growing and breaking apart all at the same time on a huge scale. And so I think that is why Christmas resonates so much in the 1940s, and it pops up in so many movies.
Well, Christmas in Connecticut, you've got a soldier that's in the hospital and he's finding comfort in reading these columns by Barbara Stanwyck's character, because even though she was making it up, it symbolized warmth and love and home and food and comfort. And I'm sure that's why she bends over backwards in that movie, to give that soldier those things, even if she's kind of going to have to manufacture those things. I love that movie so much.
Me too. And in Meet Me in St. Louis, this is a film set in the past. It's set around the turn of the century. And it's like this, and it came out in 1944. So the war's still going on. And imagine people on the home front got to be taken back to a past idealized time of American history, where the Christmas is as charming and beautiful and musical as it is there. And there's a real nostalgia element there that I think spoke to wartime audiences.
Oh, definitely. Let me see if we got some more questions coming in. Benjamin says, who of of the classic Hollywood stars would you have liked to see in a Christmas movie?
That-
That's a great question.
That is an excellent question. I have to give that a little bit of thought.
Benjamin just answered mine.
Oh.
Oh my God, Benjamin, you read my mind. I was thinking, a Maryland Christmas comedy. And
Oh,
then Benjamin said,
yes.
I totally see Marilyn Monroe appearing as a Christmas angel helping Rock Hudson. Oh my God. Awesome. Benjamin, you should have been a development executive at Fox like a long, long time ago. That's a great idea.
I would have liked to see Jean Tierney in one just because I love Jean
Oh,
Tierney.
me too. Oh my gosh.
And I could see her in a Remember the Night type story, maybe. Or maybe, you know, like the character Ginger Roger plays in I'll Be Seeing You, which is a movie I really love and I wish more people would know about. It's Ginger Rogers and Joseph Cotton, and this is also tied to the war. He's a returning, he's a war veteran who is suffering from PTSD, and he's very unstable. And Ginger Rogers is a woman who's just been furloughed from prison, where she's been serving time for having caused the death of a man who was about to assault her. So it's a very modern, topical film on several levels, and made in 1944. And it's just about, such a gentle romance of these two unstable, lonely souls opening up to each other and being vulnerable and finding love with each other. It was one of the biggest hits of the 1944 Christmas box office season.
Wow.
And it never really gets shown much today.
Oh my gosh, I need to see this thing because I haven't seen that one. You know, another thing, I did a book called Hollywood Celebrates the Holidays back in 2015 with Mary Mallory. And one of our publicity, it's about the history of publicity stills of holidays. And one of the photos we have is Peter Lorre taking a baseball bat to Sydney Greenstreet as Santa Claus. I'm like, oh, I wish those two could have made a Christmas noir comedy, like a Home Alone 1944 with like Peter Lorre, Sydney Greenstreet, and oh my God, I wish they could have done that. That would have been great.
Hey, it would have been fun to have a Marx Brothers Christmas movie too. That would have been, it's sort of like the same kind of humor in a way as National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, but it would be much better.
Talking about some serious missed opportunities. And I know I'm getting a little off the topic, but the other day I posted because Jimmy Stewart is doing this like voiceover thing for some app, I think called Calm. And I got kind of upset reading that because as a creative person, you don't want your voice, your likeness to be taken without your permission and used. And that was a huge sticking point in the strikes. And I remember years ago, there was a commercial with Fred Astaire dancing around with a vacuum cleaner. And I myself was horrified by that. I'm like, Fred did not approve that. He's no longer alive. Let him rest. So I kind of wonder if this is going to be something we're going to start seeing, because I don't like it. As much as it's fun to bat around these ideas, I do not want to see a world where they actually happen without these artists. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's not okay. And it seems like the tip of the iceberg. I don't want them to start making AI movies with dead stars in actual new movies. That is just wrong.
That's not the future I want. Not at all. That it's fun to just brainstorm about what could have been.
Sure.
And I have such a thing for Groucho Marx, so now that's all I'm going to think about. I love him. Oh my God, I love Groucho Marx. When I got really upset during the pandemic and I would just have anxiety issues, I would put on Marx Brothers movies and just climb into bed, lay there and be like, it's going to be okay. I have Groucho. So I don't know. I love the Marx Brothers. So that was a tremendous missed opportunity there. Okay, Ruth. Hello, Ruth. Ruth is asking, what are some of your favorite Christmas songs?
Oh, this is a great question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you. I love the classics that we all know, like White Christmas, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas, wonderful songs. But there are some others that popped up in some of these movies in this book, which really blew me away. And I just thought were so beautiful and charming. One of them, this is really unknown, but there's a black comedy called We're No Angels with Humphrey Bogart.
Oh, yeah.
Peter Ustinov, Aldo Ray, directed by Michael Curtiz. And this is a very funny, farcical, very dark comedy set in in the Pacific. They're Devil's Island escapees, and they're these three crooks have escaped prison and are planning to rob a shopkeeper and murder the family. But Christmas softens them, and they decide the family is so nice they couldn't kill them. They would ruin their Christmas. That's right. So they end up helping them.
If
And
all stories ended that well.
and there's a lovely scene where Joan Bennett, who is one of the family members, they're all celebrating Christmas together, having dinner, and she sits down at the piano and she starts playing and singing the song. I think it's "Sentimental Moments," and it's just that is the moment in the film that inspires the three crooks to change their ways and transform into angels from devils. And it's a really lovely scene. And then later on, they sing a song back to the family too. And it's a great moment. There are others too. What are some that you like?
Oh gosh. I know Phil Spector, not that, I want to endorse him, but he did make some really good Christmas music. Like somewhere around here, I have the Phil Spector Christmas album because it's kind of that bubblegum pop 50s sound, which is so fun. I love Oh Holy Night. Every time I hear that song, I just feel so emotional. That's a beautiful song. And rocking around the Christmas tree is always a lot of fun. There's a lot of good ones. There's a lot of good ones.
Yeah, there are songs in Christmas movies that maybe are not Christmas songs, but are really beautiful in the context of the story, like the Sentimental Moments one, or like there's a scene at the end of Christmas in Connecticut where they go to a barn dance.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it's such a delightful scene, and it's just the music, the dancing, it just feels like such an authentic slice of home front life in the mid 40s.
Barn dances are due for a comeback. I have
Yes.
never attended a barn dance. That needs to happen.
Yeah, there's basically one in Remember the Night too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love barn dances. Okay, let's see. Leslie Apple is saying Jimmy Stewart had a harrowing experience in World War II as the pilot of a B-4 Liberator. He lived a real life in 12 o'clock high. That's the edge we see in It's a Wonderful Life. Oh, Benjamin is a factory of ideas. Can I just say that? Benjamin is saying, what about a Mae West starring a sinner for Christmas?
Pre-code Christmas movie with Mae West. I'm there.
I'm there. I would see that. If I had a time machine tonight, I would love to see that get made because that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I haven't, if anyone out there knows of any pre-code movies that really could be called Christmas movies, let me know because I haven't really seen any.
Yeah, to be honest, I can't think of any either. And another missed opportunity. Yeah. But think of all the naughty and nice, all the yeah. My mind reels at what Mae West could have, or Jean Harlow could have done with a Christmas movie in 1932.
Naughty or Nice could have been the title of the movie.
Yeah. Shoot, that would be awesome. And of course, for those of you watching who love Turner Classic Movies as much as we do, Cary Grant is the star of the month, which Cary is the gift that will never, ever stop giving. No. Ever.
No, he will always be popular, always be beloved, always be watched and known. Isn't it interesting how some major stars of that era are just completely forgotten today? Maybe not by those of us here watching this and doing this because our lives revolve around movies to that degree, but to normal people who don't live and breathe classic movies, how many of them even really know who Alan Ladd is anymore? One of the biggest stars of the era. I know it sounds weird to say that because we still see his movies and talk about him, but there really aren't that many on the level of Cary Grant, Humphrey Bogart.
That transcend just being a movie star into being an icon.
Well, and an icon that has endured and is still like people have heard of Humphrey Bogart.
Yeah.
And Jimmy Stewart today. I think everyone is aware of those. In large part, Jimmy Stewart is known because of It's a Wonderful Life, because it gets brought back every year at Christmas, broadcast on NBC and Revival, Blu-ray, the whole thing. And, Eddie Muller often says that noir is a gateway, is the gateway drug into classic cinema for people, which I think is absolutely true.
Yes.
But and this is another way noir is related to Christmas. Christmas movies are just as strong a gateway drug because even people who don't watch a lot of classic cinema, they do watch It's a Wonderful Life, White Christmas, Miracle on 34th Street, whatever other title every year. And so maybe those are the first classic movies that they know, and hopefully it will inspire them to seek out others.
Definitely. But I run into that on my cemetery tour because sometimes I'll get people that have absolutely no idea who Marion Davies was or who Tyrone Power was, but they usually know who Judy Garland was
Yeah.
and who Valentino was. So yeah, there's some stars that have kind of transcended time, and there's others that they're really in desperate need of discovery, or rediscovery by some of these people. And I always say on the tours, I can show you the graves, I can tell you the stories, but the movies are how they live on. So, because I mean, when I was a kid, we're about the same age. Like you had to watch it on TV. Like when It's a Wonderful Life aired when I was a little girl, it was appointment viewing because if you missed it 364 days later, you must wait until it comes on again. This is before the big VHS tapes.
Right.
So now I tell young people on the tour, like, look, you have got streaming channels, you have TCM. I would have given anything to have that when I was young.
Yeah.
So this stuff is so accessible today in a way that it never was before.
And yet so many classic movies will never be available on streaming, because they're not deemed commercial or popular enough. The like small obscure films that we love discovering so much. TCM is great for showing them.
Yes.
Criterion Channel to some degree too. But they're not going to stream, and I really worry that we're heading back somewhat to the era we grew up in, where these movies will become harder to find. Because there was a time where they were being released on DVD and Blu-ray all the time.
Yeah.
They still are to some degree, and I've never given up my physical media collection, thank God. But it's not quite the way it was 15 years ago.
It's not, and I always too recommend supporting Flicker Alley and Kino Lorber Classics. Both of those labels put out terrific stuff. It's funny, I'm in the middle of a move, and the other night I finally stopped goofing off and started packing. And I thought to myself, okay, I just need one box for my DVDs, right?
Yeah,
Hours later, I'm on box number 4, and we're talking about big boxes here. And I was like, I have a lot of movies, like thousands. And then a friend's like, I'll just get rid of half of them at least. And I was like, oh no. And she kept saying, just get rid of them. I'm like, no, but what if they suddenly become not available on streaming? Yeah. And I've given away the DVDs. So if I have nothing else but DVDs in my new place, it may come to that. But yeah. I can't get off that physical media. I don't want to,
Same here. I still watch it. I still use it, and
yeah.
I still acquire it. And Kino, God bless Kino Lorber. I've done several commentaries for them for Blu-rays, and they're films that I've really loved and been passionate about, and feel so proud to help keep alive for people. It's amazing the volume of their output.
It really is. And I always encourage people to, if you're going to buy DVDs, buy from those labels and keep them going. I feel like it's a vote with your wallet kind of thing. And I know some of these may be available on bootleg or YouTube, but if you give Kino Lorber your $20, your $30, I feel like you're kind of voting with your wallet that you will pay for this.
Right. And they'll keep doing it. They'll keep releasing them.
What DVDs have you done? You've done a lot of commentaries on DVDs too.
I've done 15, 16, somewhere in there.
Oh, awesome.
I don't do them very often because they're so much work. They're not much pay. And so they end up becoming labors of love. And I'm happy to do it if it's a film that I'm especially passionate about or happen to already know a lot about and be excited about. So that plays a big part in it. It's been a couple years since I've done one, but some of my favorites have been Sudden Fear. Joan Crawford.
I love that movie.
Such a great movie. That was put out by the Cohen Film Collection.
Another great place to support. Nice.
And The Lavender Hill Mob, the British comedy of Alec Guinness, that was a Kino release. That was really fun to do. Partly because I spent a lot of my childhood growing up in London. And when I first saw the movie is when I was a kid living in London. And I remember with my dad going around to visit a lot of the locations. And so I've always been fascinated by that.
Very cool. And also you don't get all the extra bonus features on streaming content that you do on physical media as well. So that's another really valuable thing about it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Definitely. And it's scary too with all the changes that have happened at Warner Brothers Discovery. I just feel like these movies are a little fragile. Do you know what I mean?
I know.
In terms of, will they still be here? Will they be yanked off television? Will they be yanked off DVDs? Or like I said, that's why I think the case is so strong for keeping this.
I think so too. I mean, the fact that the whole the whole episode with TCM and Warner Brother Discovery earlier in the year, what was really scary about that was just almost how casually TCM might have gone away. It really felt for a moment like they might pull the plug altogether.
Right?
And can you just imagine the effect that would have on just suddenly the amount of movies that are just out there in the ether that we can access? It's not the only outlet, but it's really an important one.
Well, I think it's one of the things about TCM too is it's such an educational resource. Like we both went to film school. I feel like my education has never ended. And TCM is a big reason why, as is the American Cinematheque, the UCLA Archive, New Beverly. But I'm always seeing stuff. Like, this is one of my friends' jokes. You've seen everything. I'm like, no, I haven't. They are constantly finding things I haven't seen in ages, things that are rare, and to me, that learning process, they're like an educational center in a way. I learned so much about film because of TCM. And I love the intros, the outros, the context that they do, the documentaries, the extras. I mean, it's a valuable cultural resource. And I'm just so glad that Scorsese and Paul Thomas Anderson and some of these Spielberg, some of these other filmmakers stood up and said, absolutely not, you can't do this. So that's why, even though the festival might be a lot smaller and less scaled up this year, to me, my attitude is, I'm just glad it's there.
Yeah, me too. I'm just gonna go with the flow.
Yeah.
It's smaller, fine. But, however it's different, we'll just go with it. Because we're lucky that it's happening at all.
We're lucky it's happening, and we're lucky the channel is still here too.
Yeah.
So I think they got probably a real good lesson on the fan base of all this stuff with all this, because I think they were, I'm guessing they were probably very surprised at the outcry that happened when this stuff started to go down.
Absolutely.
Now, where can people buy your book? I always recommend people buy books at Larry Edmunds in Hollywood. They are a wonderful resource. They have been so good to both of us, to the film history community. And if you can order from them, you can order from them online. I think they ship internationally. What other bookstores? I know you've been to Book Soup too. There's other ones.
Soup, yes, I would second what you say about Larry Edmunds. They're great. If you're in LA, go to Larry Edmunds. In fact, they have signed copies of my books. You can also order online and they'll ship. Beyond that, you can really get the book wherever you buy books, the old cliche. So that includes the usual online sites that we all know about. But it's also around in bookstores. It's Book Soup. A lot of independent booksellers have it. So I'm all in favor of supporting them.
Yeah, and my whole thing is, I don't want to live in a world where bookstores aren't a thing.
Yeah.
Like, whenever I go home to Georgia, I take my nephew to bookstores. I usually wind up buying him tons of stuff, but I can't help it. But I want him to see that these places are important, because I don't want to live in a world where I can't browse through books.
Yeah.
So I think that's another resource that really needs as much support as it can get.
Amen. Absolutely.
All right, let's see if we've got more questions rolling in. Let's see. Eric Johnson is saying Jimmy Stewart's performance in It's a Wonderful Life was masterful. He showed raw emotion, probably caused from PTSD. I didn't even know that they had that term at the time. It's probably called shell shock, right?
Yeah.
This was his first post-war movie. The scene with him and Donna Reed when she was on the telephone was incredible.
Oh, yes. And there's an interview that Leonard Maltin conducted with Frank Capra. And Capra said to Maltin that scene on the phone, they did it in one take with no rehearsal. And Capra was like, can you believe it? It was one big unrehearsed take. Like, he was so impressed, as rightfully so, I think. And you kind of think that added to the intensity of it, the fact that it was the first time they'd actually done it.
Yeah, it had to feel weird after going through an experience like war, and then you're back on a movie set, and you're probably thinking, like, what am I doing here when I've been, it had to have been a real,
it's also a struggle. Even that scene is a very violent scene. He is like, I am not going to marry you. I'm not going to move out of Bedford Falls. I'm not. And he gets really violent and intense. But of course, it's also very romantic. That's just part of that. That's a great example of the intensity and an unexpected place in that film.
And I'm thinking too, Stewart was probably kind of on edge again. So maybe that edginess kind of just, maybe it's kind of good you only had one take of that, because if you'd done several takes, maybe you wouldn't have that rawness that you get on that first take.
Yeah.
You know?
And yet, you know, in the earlier scenes when he and Mary first meet and they go home after the dance where the swimming pool opens up and all that, this is like vintage, charming, comedic Jimmy Stewart. And so it gives us that side of Jimmy Stewart too.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. Well, this is so weird because anytime I look up comments during one of these episodes, I'll see them and I'm like, oh, okay, I'll go through them and think I've gone through them all. And then after I log off, like tons more will populate. And I'm always like, oh, well, crap, I didn't see that. So maybe later, if we decide to answer questions on Facebook, we will both answer your questions or comment on Facebook, because technology sometimes can just be a little frustrating. But okay, Rick Carl saying, do either of you have a favorite film that just stands out above the rest? Christmas.
Well, I mean, how is that different from asking what my favorite Christmas movie
Yeah,
is?
yeah.
I don't mean to be glib, but I mean, you know, It's a Wonderful Life and Remember the Night stand out for me just for their sheer quality. There are others that stand out for being really unique. Here's one. Well, okay, yeah, I'll mention this. It's
okay.
It's not really a Christmas movie, but it has Christmas in it a lot, and it's a lot.
If Die Hard can count.
No, Die Hard really is a Christmas movie. The one I'm thinking of is The Silent Partner. This is a sort of neo-noir. It was made in the 70s in Canada, written by Curtis Hanson, and it stars Elliot Gould and Christopher Plummer. And it's basically about a bank robbery that goes bad and ends up like Elliot Gould plays a bank teller who knows the bank is going to be robbed and concocts this brilliant scheme to steal most of the money himself while the robber is actually trying to steal it and putting all the blame on the robber. The robber is played by Christopher Plummer. He escapes and he is not happy about being cheated out of his money. So the rest of the movie is like a cat and mouse between the two. And it gets very suspenseful, violent, pulpy. It's even romantic. There's a scene of horror in it. But it starts in the Christmas season. Christopher Plummer plays a department store Santa who takes out a gun and robs the bank. I mean, so it's kind of crazy that way, but it's a lot of fun to watch at Christmas because it's so different. It's like a palate cleanser to Remember the Night and Christmas in Connecticut.
Those are probably my two favorites, is the two Barbara Stanwycks, Remember the Night, Christmas in Connecticut. But since we did make a Bing Crosby recipe, I would feel very remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about Bing.
Yes.
Because he also, like Stanwyck, has two Christmas classics, Holiday Inn and White Christmas. So do you enjoy those movies? And
yes, I prefer Holiday Inn. I just think it's a better movie. I just think it moves better. It's just snappier. It has an energy to it that I really like. White Christmas is a much longer film. It's 2 full hours. And it's not trying to be this fast-moving, snappy film. It's much more leisurely. It's just a lot slower. Not to say that it's bad, but it's just not as much my cup of tea as Holiday Inn. Holiday Inn, you know, Holiday Inn introduced the song White Christmas on screen, and it became linked to Bing Crosby forever. But the way he sings it and the way it's used in each film is very different. And I thought that was a really interesting evolution. In Holiday Inn, he sings it to Marjorie Reynolds as a love song, purely on a romantic basis. They're at a piano, they're in the living room with a fire, it's snowing outside, they're in the country, very Christmassy. And it's intimate and romantic. By the time of White Christmas, the song had become the biggest hit of all time, came back every year, was on the pop charts every year, had won an Oscar. The original master wore out, so Crosby had to record a new version in the mid-40s. And so Paramount wanted to capitalize on the song again, so they devised this film, White Christmas, as a sort of loose reworking of a similar kind of story as Holiday Inn, although it's not exactly the same. And in this movie, Bing sings it twice, the beginning and at the end. And at the beginning, he's singing to a group of soldiers during the war. They have their heads hanging, they're sort of lost in their thoughts, thinking wistfully of home as he's singing the song. And it's so the song is not presented romantically, it's presented nostalgically. And by the end of the film, the song is performed on a stage within the movie to an audience that is comprised mostly of war veterans, presumably the same people who were, the same kind of people who were in the first scene. And so you get the sense that they're thinking not just wistfully of their own home lives, but of the time when they were together in the war theater as a band of brothers and a family in that sense. So it's like this layering of nostalgia. And I think the song ever since then has been more linked to in people's minds to nostalgia than love and romance.
That makes sense. Makes sense. And speaking of yet another Christmas movie that could have and should have happened but did not happen, can you imagine if Bing Crosby, Bob Hope, and Dorothy L'Amour had done a Christmas romp?
Road movie.
A road movie, The Road to the North Pole.
Yes, or even if it, that sounds a little too fantastical, maybe.
Okay.
If it was to a real place, not that the North Pole isn't a real place, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, like The Road to London or something.
It could have been like the road to some kind of snowy country, the road to Switzerland, or the road to Norway.
Or they could have done The Road to like Saudi Arabia, where they had to make Christmas snow because they didn't have Christmas snow. So,
Exactly. By the way, one movie I have in my book is The Lion in Winter, which is a costume drama comedy from the late 60s. And it's set in the 12th, no, it's set in the 12th or 11th century. I think in the 12th century. And it's the royal family reuniting over Christmas time. And they're the ultimate dysfunctional family. Peter O'Toole, Katharine Hepburn lead it. But there's a Christmas tree in the movie, and there's a scene where they're exchanging presents. And that's an oxymoron. There were no Christmas trees in France in the 11th century. They came later, but who cares? You just go with it. It's actually more of as much a modern movie as it is a period one in that sense.
Definitely. But to be honest, I'm not going to be able to stop thinking about the Sinner for Christmas with Mae West and what could have been. Oh, that's going to torture me now in a good way. In a good way.
Yeah, I want to see that movie, Tony. I want to see it.
Benjamin, that is the best idea in the history of ever, by the way. Best idea ever. I wish you had run Paramount in 1932. It would be awesome. Well, I think that pretty much concludes our episode here. So I'll show you guys the cookies. I don't know, but I've got frosting all over my hands.
All over me. Look.
Such a mess. Oh my gosh. But here are the Christmas cookies. They turned out really well. I will post the recipe and encourage you to make them. I think they turned out really, really well.
Yeah, they're good. I second that.
We'll be eating more in a moment. So thank you guys for tuning in to Hollywood Kitchen, and happy holidays, happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas. And please stay tuned for more food, fun, and film history from Hollywood Kitchen.
Bye.